Hi, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. A lot of negative talk around media about where prices are heading in Australian real estate, and I just want to put some perspective to that by quoting the latest figures from one of the sources that I respect the most, and that's SQM Research, which is the company of Louis Christopher. Now, Louis was one of the people quoted in that scurrilous 60-minute segment on Sunday, and he has made a number of statements this week claiming that his views were severely misrepresented. And I believe him because I know him pretty well. I know him to be A, an absolute professional in what he does, and B, an honest man. And I know how media, particularly television, can achieve the outcomes they want to with selective editing. I've experienced it myself. So what's really happening with prices in our major cities around Australia? It all very much depends on whose figures you believe and who you listen to and how you interpret them. But just to give you a perspective from the viewpoint of SQM Research, what their figures say, according to their latest data out this week, prices in annual terms, that's comparing now with a year ago, are higher than they were a year ago in 5 of the 8 capital cities, and in the other 3 they're a little bit lower. So according to these figures, current pricing has grown in annual terms by more than 10% in Canberra, slightly in Brisbane, 6.5% in Hobart. Melbourne's still up 3%. Perth is now back in the black, having been in decline for several years. It's now 1% up, according to these figures. So Canberra, Brisbane, Hobart, Melbourne and Perth all have pricing levels higher in average terms than they were 12 months ago, according to SQM Research figures. Sydney's a little bit down, percent down. Darwin is still down. It's been down for a while. And Adelaide is down slightly as well. But overall, in terms of the national situation, SQM Research has prices 2.5% higher for houses than they were 12 months ago. Similar scenario with the unit market. 5 of the 8 capital cities have unit prices higher than a year ago, and 3 have prices a little bit lower, or in the case of Darwin, a lot lower. So just another batch of figures from the same source. One of the best sources we find for information about vacancy rates and rentals also comes from Louis Christopher's SQM Research. Now, his report out this week shows that vacancies on average around the nation have tightened in the last month and also in the last 12 months. So looking at the month-on-month figures and the annual figures, there's been a general tightening in vacancies. And if we look at where vacancies are now in each of the 8 capital cities and compare with 12 months ago, in 5 of those cities they're now tighter, and in most cases a lot tighter than they were 12 months ago. So we have, for example, in Adelaide, vacancy rates in over 12 months have dropped from 1.5% to 1.2%. So very tight in Adelaide. One of the reasons why we're positive about that market. In Perth, which has been a little bit serious, almost 5% 12 months ago, now down to 3.5%. So a trend of improvement in Perth. Part of the evidence why we see recovery in the Perth market. Melbourne is down to 1.6%. Brisbane, 12 months ago was 3.4%. Now they're down to 2.8%. So a steady improvement in Brisbane's vacancy rate. Canberra, which was very, very tight at 1% 12 months ago, but now is even tighter, 0.7%. One of the reasons why Canberra leads on rental growth in the capital city markets, and one of the reasons why we like the prospects looking forward in the Canberra market. Now, Hobart's actually had a slight rise in its vacancy rate, but it's still the tightest rental market in capital city Australia. 12 months ago, the vacancy rate for Hobart, according to these figures, was 0.3%, almost nothing available for rent. It's increased slightly to 0.5%, so it's still very, very tight, and still the tightest rental market in capital city Australia. The only cities where there's been a significant rise in vacancies in Sydney, which is up from 2% to 2.8%. And I would point out that some individual markets where there's a lot of apartments in Sydney have much higher vacancy rates than that. And in Darwin, the vacancy rate has risen in 12 months from 2.6% to 3.5%. So that market is still struggling. But in most of the capital cities, we've seen quite a significant tightening of the rental market in the last 12 months, according to these figures. So that's pretty good news for property investors, perhaps not so good if you're a tenant looking for somewhere to rent. Okay, so just some statistics. The point I always make to people that media always treats price data and other real estate statistics that come from various sources, when each batch comes in, it's published and presented as fact. Well, it's not fact. It's simply a snapshot according to one research entity using a particular methodology. And if you line up price data, how much a price is written in all the capital cities, you get data from 5 different companies, you're going to get 5 different results. In some cases, they're going to be contradicting one another. It's not factual. It's simply the opinion of one research source using a particular methodology, and they all use different methodologies, and they quite often come up with very different answers. So according to this source, SQM Research, which is one that we respect, there's a very positive outcome for property markets in terms of vacancies, and also quite a positive outcome on the latest data on prices, with 5 of the 8 capital cities having pricing levels that are currently higher than they were 12 months ago. Very, very different from the general message you're getting from media, which is talking about prices falling across Australia. Absolute rubbish. There's actually no evidence from any source supporting that contention. It's just the very slack and misleading way in which they report markets at the moment, with their relentless pursuit of negative sensationalism, which seems to be the way they think and behave, sadly. So just trying to put things a little bit back in perspective for people looking for real information about what's really going on in real estate markets around Australia. That's it for now. I'll talk to you again soon. Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au signing off.